Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and we are back again today, episode 114? Yeah, it is. Episode 100. I had to think about it. I was like, what was the last episode we recorded? Episode 114 for your viewing pleasure. And if you didn't know, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Kapow. Kapow. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, the notification bell. That way you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios, youtube.com/2for1 Studios, the best place to consume the content. We have 2 for 1 Joe live every Monday at 9 a.m. for all your nerdy news you need to know about and movie history. Movie news? I don't know. It's all movie history. I'm everywhere all at once today, Daniel, probably because we're talking about everything everywhere all at once.
Man, what
this
a
wasn't
segue.
I know this wasn't on the docket, but there's a lot of content out there, and you and I had saw this a couple nights ago together on a whim, and we both liked it so much we thought, hey, let's just do a podcast on it. So tell me your thoughts on everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen the trailers and I wanted to see it just because the trailer looked really good. I like Michelle Yeoh. There's just a lot of things that it had going for it. And then I think it was kind of a last second. We just decided to go a couple days before on this past Tuesday, and I really enjoyed the movie. In fact, it's stayed with me a bit, where I kind of keep coming back to thinking about it every now and then, which is not always true of a lot of movies. So I really loved it. I thought it was a wonderful blend of kind of comic booky concepts that we're pretty familiar with interesting cultural and familial dynamics, and kind of exploring those relationships in a really interesting way. It's such a dense movie. I think I mentioned this to you. I feel like going back to watch it again, there's probably even more to pull out of it, especially once you kind of understand, even from the beginning, what's really going on. But yeah, I really loved it. I thought it was just a great idea for a film, and really, really great execution. So really enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same ballpark as you, right? I mean, I remember seeing the trailer, I don't remember how long ago, but seeing it being like, hey, this looks pretty good. And the way they were cutting it, and just like the absurdity of like the amount of different types of versions of her we saw in the trailer, and like, wow, this could be kind of something special. And we heard some buzz, of course, going in the South by Southwest. We heard Bruce, I think he said he watched the Nicolas Cage movie, which come out today actually in theaters, which is I can't think what it's called.
The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Massive Talent, yeah. It's hashtag
What's
Massive
with these
Talent.
titles? I mean, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, everywhere, everything, everywhere, all at once. Like, we're getting into like sentence structure, like
we are
title. Like,
well, I think
which
part of it is
they stand out, I guess, with their titles.
What's interesting about both of these movies, they obviously played South by together, but they're also they have some veteran actors in there, and they also have like an indie feel, but they're somehow getting at least buzz enough to jump to the screen. Like, this is, I mean,
100%.
And it's so interesting, and part of it maybe just because of lack of movies right now, and so these studios decided, hey, maybe we could push these a little bit, and because they are so well made that they could kind of get away with it. I don't know, it's interesting, and I don't expect that the initial plan was for these to be as big as they are. And I'm not saying they're huge by any stretch of the means, but I didn't expect even this type of conversation. And like, I mean, I'm on YouTube, and granted, I'm sure the algorithm is pushing this, but I'm seeing Massive Talent trailers everywhere. Like it's like a big movie, and it's not a big movie.
Yeah, it is interesting. It feels, and like you said, maybe, or as I'm thinking, it may be a product of COVID, because with both of those
Yeah.
movies, you have relatively streamlined production. Like Everything Everywhere All at Once, I can speak for because I've actually seen it. But a lot of that movie takes place in the same office building, and even the same part of the office building. And then a lot of it takes place on what I would assume is a green screen, like soundstage. And so, like, just thinking about that, it's relatively pretty easy to get those kind of spaces available, and especially, like, I mean, probably the most people in any scene was maybe 10, if in some of the larger like fight scenes, and you really have three, maybe four main cast members. I guess if you squeeze in the father, but he's kind of this, like, I would say you could at least count Michelle Yeoh, her daughter, and
Short Round.
her husband, Short Round, yes, as main characters. And I might go as far as saying as well as the IRS lady. I'm blanking on her name as well. I should have pulled up the cast. But yeah,
Jamie Lee Curtis. Jamie Lee Curtis,
yes.
Yeah.
And looking at massive talent, I mean, there definitely looks like there's some stunts, in there with like there's a bit more action with that. But at the same time, it also seems like most of that movie is just Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage,
Right.
like hanging out. Which, again, when you have to work within COVID regulations, that's a lot easier to work with. Especially a lot of that movie takes place outside. You know what I mean? Like, things like that make it, that would have been easier to make during lockdown than, and especially when you look at a movie like Spider-Man No Way Home, where it's like, sometimes you're just like, the amount of extra work they would have had to do to shoot that under like safety regulations, probably like extended production time by a significant amount, and then money, a significant amount more. But yeah, no, it is interesting.
No, it is, and just kind of glancing here, everything everywhere all at once has $25 million budget. Massive Talent has a $30 million budget, and All at Once was shot in January to March of 2020 during the pandemic, and it looks like, let's just see real quick. I'm curious. Bear with us, viewers. And yeah, it was shot in, well, I guess they shot in October of 2020. So these are kind of
both COVID productions.
Yeah, exactly. Both COVID productions.
Even at times it was much more of a lockdown then than it is now.
Absolutely, yeah.
For
and
both of those films.
Massive Talent was distributed by Lionsgate, and everything was by A24.
Yes,
which makes total sense for A24 to kind of go 100%. To kind of branch. They've been kind of doing these indie kind of somewhat thriller horror movies for a while, and this has horror elements in it for sure, but this 100% is kind of let's kind of expand that and have a high concept action film. Real quick, my thoughts on it. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I do think there might have been moments. This is like my only complaint, and maybe just I mentioned this to you before. It may just be because I was in that theater and it was kind of cramped seating and whatever. I feel like it might have been a little too long. I think I might have enjoyed this movie more on my couch, just for comfortability's sake. It is kind of a longer movie, I believe, right? It's let's see where it sits right now.
Almost 2.5 hours, 220, I believe.
Wow, yeah. So it's a long movie, and it does kind of. But the thing about that movie is that it's constantly moving, and it's constantly showing you so many new and exciting things. So I loved it. I mean, I loved the ending to it. I loved, besides one minor thing, and I loved just. I think I walked away from it most with just being so impressed by the filmmaking.
Yes.
Not only the actors' performances, the score, the production design, the blocking, the fight choreography. They nailed everything. And
I mean, this is basically a kung fu movie.
100%.
And I didn't know that going in at all. Like I knew from a couple of scenes, it's like, okay, there's like some kung fu looking things in it. But I would say, like, I don't know, 30% of this movie is fight scenes in kung fu style.
Probably. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like,
or
if
more.
not more, and like
Probably more.
and it's all done so well. Like there's such
Yeah.
entertaining. It honestly, it reminds me of kind of like old Jackie Chan films where like half the reason you're here is just to watch him do crazy stuff. And it might have nothing to do with the story, but seeing Jackie Chan slide through a ticket box window at a theater or just something like that is like part of the spectacle of the movie. And that's, I wasn't expecting that going into this movie, but it had that in spades, I would say. Like just some of the best kung fu and choreography probably since like John Wick.
I think it's better. I mean,
probably better. Yeah.
I say that I love John Wick, but there is something a little different about Michelle Yeoh versus Keanu Reeves, just because she's been doing it her entire career.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. There's John Wick stuff in John Wick. I'm like, holy crap! And that movie might be a little more digestible, especially like because they're shorter, they're easier to follow.
It's a bit more gun fu. If you
100%.
You're
right.
It's got its own version of what it does, and it does
100%.
it does what it's wanting to do like perfectly.
Oh, exactly.
But I agree with you that there's something a little more impressive about watching these scenes. Knowing that Michelle Yeoh's actually doing it and it looks amazing. And I agree. This is it. Just I come away from this movie being like, damn, like, wow, that was like just impressive, like from top to bottom on those fight scenes.
No, it really is. And it's funny you mentioned Jackie Chan. Matt mentioned this to me the other day after we'd saw it. But apparently, it's a little bit of research, but the movie was conceived with Jackie Chan in mind for the lead role. And they tried to get him, and they couldn't. So they ended up switching the role to a female, and it became a father or a husband-wife story. And they thought that made it more relatable, which I think is the right call, 100%. Like that makes it. I can't like I mean, I'll obviously different universe. Haha. I would love to see Jackie Chan version of this, but
I mean, he could be her brother, right? Like in
a sequel, maybe, yeah.
Easily.
I don't think this movie needs a sequel, nor does it. I don't know how they could do it or why they would want to do it, but let's talk real quick.
I hope they don't force it in there,
I don't think so.
It made
either.
money, let's run and make another one kind of thing.
But I mean, it hasn't made that much money. I mean, it's made 19 million so far. It's only been out for a week, I believe, which is really good for that kind of movie, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I bet this is the kind of movie that will do even better at VOD and streaming. Like this, whatever streaming platform this ends up on, I bet it will do very, very well. Very well.
I'm surprised that it hasn't released in China yet. I mean, this movie would do.
There's no way it will. It's got the homosexual LGBT story.
It does. It does, and there's
ever let that in.
You're right. It's totally right. Man, that's why. Yeah. Man, okay. Well, they would have made so much money just because. I mean, they do like Michelle Yeoh, and Jackie Chan. These guys are bigger than movie stars right over there. They're icons. Yep. And they're icons here too, of course, but it's just a different level over there. Yeah, I mean, real quick, Daniel, you're doing this better than me. For our listeners, tell us real quick the bare bones plot of this movie in terms of what people need to know to kind of get excited about it.
Yeah, sure. So I think what's amazing about this movie is that it is this kung fu style action film that is married with this very small stakes family drama. Mm-hmm. And I think so. Basically, the concept is, Michelle Yeoh. I'm sorry, I need to probably just pull up the cast names here so I don't just continue.
It's Evelyn's her name. It's Evelyn is her name.
Yes, no, and I wanted to say like the actual names of the people.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Michelle Yeoh's character Evelyn. Is married to Short Round, which in this show he's called Waymond, which is there's something just kind of precious about it. He's named Raymond with a W, so it's Waymond. It kind of sounds like a little kid saying it wrong, before they can like talk correctly. Yeah. And then their daughter, and like it's really about this family that is really estranged from each other. Michelle Yeoh and her husband are not close, so much so that he's about to serve her divorce papers, not because he doesn't love her, but because she doesn't love him. It seems to him that she doesn't. She's not close with her daughter, and there's very much these kind of typical Asian family dynamics where the mom is always correcting her daughter. She's always talking over her. She's always telling her what she should have done. It's just this kind of like you should have done this. Well, if you hadn't done that, you could be doing this. Well, if you had gone to school for that, if you had, it's just kind of this constant, which I think, even me, not being in a Asian cultured family, I can relate to that son too. And basically what happens is in a nutshell is that through the course of this horrible day where they're messing up their taxes and, talking about getting divorced and the daughter is, seemingly maybe running away from family forever, kind of just cutting them off. You get this wonderful multiversal time, I guess, well, not time, multiverse travel plot where a different version of Waymond comes and starts overtaking her versions of Waymond body and being like, someone's out to kill you. There's this evil, I think, what did they call it? I can't remember the name they had for it.
Oh God, it's a running gag. Is her the bad the Jobu Tupaki?
Jobu Pataki, yes.
Tupaki. Yeah.
Tupaki,
yeah.
Tupaki, okay. And so basically it's like, hey, this being is coming from you. You have to learn how to fight with multiversal powers, kind of thing. And this is kind of thing where you can tap into a different version of yourself in a different universe where you made different decisions, and you can get the abilities that person acquired throughout their life, and then you can have them and you kind of learn them. Yeah. So it's this wonderful thing of her traveling around to these different versions of herself in these different places where it's everything as simple as her and Waymond didn't get married to everyone has hot dogs for fingers. That's the extremities of like absurdity we're dealing. It's very normal, like kind of, oh, like what if this happened? And then it's like bananas version of it. Over the course of the movie, it's discovering that Tupaki is her daughter. And basically this whole multiversal plot of her at first fighting her daughter and then learning to like try to love her through what she's going through, or accept what she's going through and understand her own part in that. It's like, it's all of this just Michelle Yeoh actually understanding her family, actually seeing them for who they are, seeing Waymond as this really sweet, loving, like just constant presence in her. That's always like, it's like the guy can't have a bad day. He's always going to look on the bright side, kind of thing. And then seeing her daughter for who she is and what she loves, and just kind of, and by the end of the movie, you could say that maybe none of the multiversal stuff maybe even happened. I mean, in theory, this could all just be some sort of like impressionistic journey of like Michelle Yeoh, like seeing her family for who they are and kind of like getting over her own perceptions of her life and her own disappointments in herself and what her life has turned into, in order to see what I guess the beauty around her that is there. And it's about this family coming together. And so like, I think that's, to me, what makes this movie so wonderful is that, again, the stakes are, will they stay married, and will the daughter still come around for dinner every now and then? I mean, that's what's up for, like, as far as like what could be lost by the end of this movie. But you have this like absurd kung fu filled, character filled, wonderful effects, and just like this just
fantastic
bombastic adventure to get there. And I just think that's kind of the brilliance of it. And I think something we don't see enough of, like that you can have this giant, bombastic, ridiculous adventure. And I even think Spider-Man No Way Home is a good example of a little bit of this, where it's like, yes, of course the multiverse was breaking open, but what was really the stakes were his friends and family. That's what Peter's stakes were. That's what he ended up losing in Spider-Man No Way Home. That's what the movie was about. And I just love that we are talking about such a normal thing, like family dynamics, how a husband and wife get along, how a mom and a daughter get along. And we're using these comic booky, extravagant sci-fi concepts that I agree, it has this wonderful indie feel to it. It has this feel of like, they have this van where other Waymond is like coming from, like his like machine to project himself to a different universe. And it's like, we could have made that van. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing in there that was like, oh yeah, $30 million budget, or you know what I mean? There's nothing in there that was like
Sure.
heavy CGI. It's all just very practical stuff, and like, but the story is so compelling. The acting is so good. I would say, Kehu Kwan or Waymond Short Round maybe steals the show for me. Like, he's so good. Yeah, I think that's about the biggest nutshell I think I can put it in.
No, I think you did a fantastic job, and you did so good. From now on, I'm going to make you explain all the movies and stuff instead of me doing it, because I'm like a bulldozer. I just kind of go through it, not that well sometimes. But I agree with everything you said, and obviously, and you did a great description. I think you're right. I think a big thing this is, I think, the problem we get with a lot of movies, and the problem we had with the Batman recently, and I think we're fixing to get into kind of more spoilery stuff and just kind of talk about some of these gags that are reoccurring and everything.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the movie and you want to kind of go in blind, probably you want to come back later and find us again and finish the episode. But the big thing with the Batman that I think that you and I both had issues with was that he didn't really change that much as a character. There was something there, but it could have been much stronger. What's interesting was I saw this post, I think yesterday, someone posting that they'd finally watched it. This guy was a writer. And he said, oh, thank God, finally a Batman movie where Batman learns something and he actually has a character arc. And I was just kind of like, it's so interesting how everyone views these things so differently than we do.
That is an odd comment.
It was kind of odd to me. But I think what this movie does great, and what Spider-Man you mentioned does great, is it does pull it down, these big things, into a smaller concept, and there is growth, there is change happening. And that's the thing that all these movies, especially if you're talking about a more classical film or something that we watch for more entertainment value, all these things, the thing that they could do that would help them the best is to focus on the character and what that character journey is. This is coming from somebody who wants to write a book about one-liners, who dissects action scenes, who does all this stuff. I love all that, and it's a good chunk of why I watch these things. But that stuff doesn't matter if you don't care about the people or the things doing them in the moment. It don't matter as much. There's some things that are so cool, you're like, okay, this is so cool, I'll give it a pass. A la Thor.
In-game Infinity War, I would throw in there. Though at the same time, they do a great job of connecting with those characters as well.
They do a great job. It's funny because I looked at Bruce. Sometimes I'll go back and read Bruce's actual written breakdowns on the hutchfiles.com, everybody. And I went and found his Infinity War one. And he mentions you, of how like you kind of persuaded his mind on a couple things. But then he goes down to his big flaw with it, which is Thor being overpowered and he could take out Thanos. And he didn't mention my argument at all. And I was like, oh, so you clearly don't side with us at all on that one. But that's a case where it's okay, right? Where action trumps story and character. It's very far, but it can happen, in my opinion, can happen. This is the case where it's not. All these things are rooted in her learning something about herself, learning what kind of person she is, learning what kind of person she could have been. And that's hugely important. And again, you're right. The acting's
accepting
incredible.
Who she was. There's this really great moment where the Wayman from a different universe is like, you're the only one. It's kind of that classic, you're the chosen one. But the reason she's the chosen one is because she's not good at anything. Like, this is the version of it that, like, so completely, like, missed her potential in every possible area. That basically the idea is she's such a blank slate, she can learn anybody's talents from any of these other versions of herself because she has all the space to learn them, I guess. Right.
And there is an interesting, like, self-fulfilling prophecy there that's it kind of mirrors the Matrix, where he's telling her you're not good at anything, but because I know all these other versions of you, I know it's possible that you can be great at everything. So knowing you can be great, knowing that there's possibility, can help you become better, become great, learn all those things you didn't learn. That's a great lesson. A lot of people think that, and I think if people could peer into other universes and see, oh, hey, it's not necessarily the world around me, or it's all these other things. A lot of times it's the decisions I make, but I do have the ability to do these things if I make some different choices or whatever. Obviously there's a lot of factors involved, but seeing those opportunities kind of can be very influential. I do want to talk about the acting. And you're right. Ki Yu Kwan, I guess is his name. He's Short Round in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. He's also in the Goonies and a few other things. I'm pretty sure he's been a producer a little bit in the last few years, but kind of here and there. But apparently he wants to come back into acting. And man, what a fantastic role to kind of come back with. His emotional chops were so good. It did throw me for a loop hearing his voice. I felt like it got higher after being Short Round. Yeah. And I was like, it felt like they just like imprinted Short Round's voice, but actually turned up the toner a little bit. And I was like, holy crap, he didn't like change at all there.
And he may have been, I think some of that may have been intentional, because even when we see him like in the mirror universe where they didn't get married and he's like in like a nice like tux, I don't think he's talking that as high. And so I think some of that was intentional. And I think it really, really fit that version of Wayman. This kind of like, he's super humble, super sweet, optimistic, just super emotionally like vulnerable, and just like this like sweetheart little man that you just want to like cuddle with. And he's like being basically like just shunned, or just kind of cut, like just his Michelle Yeoh basically wants nothing to do with him, and kind of derides him, kind of blames him for a lot of things in her own life. So you're right. There is this wonderful message behind it, this kind of accepting your decisions you've made in the past, accepting where you are, but also recognizing what you're capable of. And then you get to do with that what you want. You know what I mean? And you get to kind of choose where you want to put your priorities. Because that was the other thing, these different versions of Michelle Yeoh, like the one that didn't choose Wayman becomes this movie star. And so like her priorities weren't family. They were, making movies, acting, making money. This other version's a singer. This other version has a lesbian relationship with Jamie Lee Curtis. You know what I mean? And like, there's just these really like, it's just showing different versions of where she put different emphasis in her life, where she put different priorities. What is she concerned with making her parents proud and doing what they want for her? Is she doing it what she wants to do for love? There's just all these wonderful like different ways of showing how different decisions could turn out, I guess. And I think also the beauty of it being that like the final sequence, like the final moment when she's like winning over her daughter, really like bringing her back to her, is like her using like a skill from all of the universes to like get there, and like really kind of like it is a little bit of that classic hero journey of like, hey, you've got these powers. Oh, I don't know about this. I don't know how to use them. I'm struggling to figure out how to use this correctly too. Oh, now I kind of, it's the it's the 10 rings moment with in Shang-Chi, where he's like finally gets the rings and you're like, oh, he knows what to do with this now. It's just kind of like, oh, I am this superhero person now. And what she does with that is reach her daughter, is kind of find a way to get past their differences and their friction and see her daughter, and also communicate like, hey, I see you. I see what you're going through. And I recognize that, for one, it's partly my fault and that it's hard for you. And I just want you to know, like, I'll always be here. It's not this like, it's not even like this heavy-handed, like, yes, like daughter should be making her parents more proud, or you know what I mean? It's just it's got this life lesson to it, but it's such a nuanced, complex version of this life lesson that I feel like there's like a dozen little life lessons baked into the big one. If that 100%. Makes sense.
No, it does. There's two more things I want to talk about before we get off here. One of them being the filmmaking, particularly the use of aspect ratio changes, which of course here at 2-for-1 Studios we are big fans of, right? So there was
especially when it's 2-for-1,
especially when it's 2-for-1. So I love the use of changing aspect ratios, not only from like 2-for-1 to 1:8:5 to whatever, but down to like 1:1 or 4:3, and just the different types of filmmaking. I think it was Chungking Express that I brought up. Whenever they're kind of in the alleyway, the way the motion plays out. There's stop motion, there's cartoon. I think there's like there's a Pinata universe, but all those things, I just think that like, hey, it's just super impressive, And
There's a rock universe.
there's a rock universe. And it's wild. And I just want to shout out to the filmmakers on that one. Let's talk about the director. I just want to know his name real quick. It was Dan Kwan.
Yeah.
And what has Dan Kwan also made? He's made
Swiss Army Man was his main one, I think.
That's his two feature films he's directed. Yes, is Swiss Army Man and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which are both fantastic movies.
It's been a while. I mean, that was 8 years ago. Swiss Army Man.
I'm sure.
So it's kind of interesting how there was a pretty big gap, which you don't normally see with younger directors.
I mean, if that was my filmography, I'd be pretty stoked right now. Those are both pretty fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the other thing I want to... Oh, yeah, go ahead. What's your thoughts on all that?
No, I would just want to shout out, like, you're right. Like, it just like, I would love to read the script for this one. This would be a great movie to do with Bruce eventually.
Yes.
Because I want to see how they wrote some of these scenes. Because you're right. It just breaks so many, like, conventional rules of what you're supposed to do. I mean, there's a good 5 whole minutes of runtime where, like, these characters are literally rocks and you see text on the screen for their conversation. And it's silent other than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, that is not how you typically engage audiences. Or, like, excuse me, that when an executive reads that, they're going to be like, oh, wow, no, that's that's not good. People are going to check out or something. Like, there was a lot of just, like, whoever, the writer or the director for this really had a very specific vision for what this movie was. And it really felt like they had the freedom to do whatever it was that they had to do to get that. And I want to, I guess, applaud, like, A21. And this is a movie where you feel like, oh, wait, there is still a place in Hollywood for, like, really creative people that want to do things outside of the box, that want to tell stories that aren't just conventional in a lot of, like, conventionally Hollywood type movies, that want to break the rules. There's still space for that. And I think, just the grassroots appreciation of this movie. Everywhere I look on the internet, people are like, this is one of the best movies I've seen in years. It's very anecdotal, but still at the same time, I do think it is getting a lot of good, like, word of mouth buzz. And that's important for Hollywood to see, is like, hey, look, they did something that a lot of things that you aren't supposed to do, and they're finding success there. So,
no, you're right. And also, real quick, it was produced, we saw this in the credits, by Anthony and Joe Russo. So that's a cool shout out there, and some big Hollywood connections. Cool. But I mean, that's one thing that A24 has really carved out, right? They have this, I mean, I don't like everything they do. There's some things that I'm like, oh man, I don't like this. But I mean, but you got to give them this. Like, I think A24 is almost synonymous with risk, but it's also, like, demanded of their brand at this point. Like, when you see A24, you're thinking, oh man, I'm going to get something that's kind of very specific, or hopefully specific in tone, and it's going to be potentially something kind of weird. And so they've done a really good job of doing that, and kind of taking over a lot of these kind of festival kind of things, and creating some buzz, So I think that's really cool. The last thing I want to talk about here, and I think it's one of the funner things, obviously, is let's talk about what's your favorite, like, kind of running gag. And this movie is heartfelt. The spectacle is crazy. Again, we have all these different things going for it, but it's also just pretty funny. And I was laughing quite a bit during this movie. And I mean, you told me the hot dog fingers universe, which it almost feels like a little bit of, I don't know if you remember this movie, Scary Movie 3, where the aliens, their genitalia was their fingers. So it's kind of a little bit like that too, because these hot dogs shoot out, I think, mustard and ketchup. Their fingers do in places.
Like ketchup and mustard, right? Like, which
it's just hilarious. And
there's some gross out humor for sure.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of sexual jokes. There's a lot of just kind of gross, just kind of like things like bathroom humor kind of stuff, which is in this they play it up like it's so clever. But I think the one
it's so serious too. Like they take it so seriously. Everything that they do is not like, they don't act like it's a gag in the movie. Yeah, it takes itself incredibly seriously, which I love. I think that's why it works.
Yeah, and thinking about that now, Swiss Army Man is a lot like that. It's a lot like it has these kind of grotesque, very serious, this is what we got to do because we got to do it, but it's got purpose behind it. And it's got that kind of humor too. You really need to check it out when you get a chance. I think you'll really like it. It's Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. It's a really great cast. That's it. That's the whole cast. Besides one other person, I think. But I think the running gag that we both probably might have liked the most is Ratacoonie. Yeah,
that one, that is definitely one to shout out. Just the fact that it was present till the end of the movie, like the very end, basically, was just kind of wonderful. They do this wonderful like montagey cutting between universes thing at like the final, like the climax of the final act. That, yeah, you're right. It is this like hilarious spoof on Disney that just works so well and like is hilarious. The other one I want to shout out is like, so how they acquire these powers from their alternate versions of themselves. They have to do something physical in order to like connect with that person. So like one point she had to tell the IRS lady like I love you and mean it in order to like acquire like kung fu powers or something. One of the things that starts happening in like the middle of the movie is like the antagonist. So these other people that have come to like fight, to try to like stop Michelle Yeoh's daughter, like kill her, and then eventually kill Michelle Yeoh too. They start trying to like butt plug themselves with like different objects around the office.
I forgot about that. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and it is, for one, it is just like so shocking. Like you just don't see it coming, and you're just like, what? But then like they actually they accomplish their goals, and then they're like, there's this. They're walking,
Bruce would mark it as a success on his little thing.
Yes, like exactly. And then like they're censoring. They start like, there's one character who's like censored around his genitalia, but you see this like giant stamp thing just like waggling out of his ass the whole time he's fighting, and it's just like this, like he's doing super cool stunt moves and like it's all really cool, and then there's just like a giant butt plug just dangling through all of it, you know, and it's just, and no one's laughing, everyone's like, this is dead serious, you know, and it's just that to me was just so out of, like I just did not expect that in that moment, and for them to commit that hard to that gag and just let that run through for so, like, it was just like, that was the moment where you realized it was a turning point of realizing what this movie was, which is just like absurdist for the point of absurdity in some ways, just for the shocking nature of the absurdity, but at the same time just finding ways to tie it in, I guess, and again, like taking itself so seriously, like there's something more to enjoy about it. It doesn't feel like a scary movie or like these other films that are like, they're like trying to give you time to laugh at jokes kind of thing, you know, like it's just this movie, you know, for being 2 hours and 20 minutes, it flies.
It does.
It flies. It's really,
it does in a lot of ways. Some ways it kind of feels like Lord of the Rings, where it's the classic example that you feel like it's going to end like 5 times kind of thing. And there's even a good gag about that at one point. But I think my favorite thing about the butt plug fight scene is its use of like dust particles. Like when they land on the ground, how like dust flies up, and like little things like that makes it so serious, and it sets the tone. And these, I mean, everyone here commits, and I mentioned it to you, I think, when we walked out, is like, I would love to have talked to the actors, or you know, why they were filming, and said like, hey, what, like, or even now, and be like, was this at all what you imagined? Did he show you test footage? How did he convince you that this was going to work? Because on paper, I don't know how you could sell this to anybody. I know A24, again, they're like, yep, greenlit, probably just based on the concept. But I don't know how.
On paper, it almost sounds like a spoof movie. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds like this is spoofing multiverse Marvel stuff in some ways.
Yeah,
you know?
100%.
And I do think, you know, you mentioned walking out of it, and I think you're right. I think another reason this movie is finding popularity is because in the zeitgeist, multiverse ideas are really popular and gaining more steam and becoming more widely just known about. You know, I mean, like 10 years ago, you know, your average movie fan, if you said, you know, what's the multiverse, they'd be like, I don't know. You know what I mean? And like now it's like everybody knows what the multiverse is. You know what I mean? It's kind of becoming like common vernacular and common like things we just talk about socially, even if we're just thinking about like what if there really is one. You know, so I do think it is very strategic in the way that it's kind of building off. I mean, we just had a giant multiverse movie in December, and you know, 4 months later this movie's coming out, and it makes sense that more people are like willing or even more interested in like, okay, this sounds, you know, multiverse movie with Michelle Yeoh. I want to watch that, you know, just to see what they do with that concept. And maybe like, I love Marvel. I love the MCU, and like what they're doing, what they want to, they're doing really, really well what they want to be doing. which is kind of this classical version of the multiverse. This just felt so fun and unique, and just it's like just the even the just the practicality of how they jump and what you have to do to acquire the powers. It's just a really fresh take on it, and it feels just fun. Just a really fun movie.
No, you're right. And we had Multiverse of Madness coming out in 2 weeks at the time of this recording.
Perfect
so
little sandwich there for them.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think it's one thing, too, is like, I mean, like this has been a thing in the comics for a long time, in comics in general. And I think maybe part of the reason of that is because comics are such a long, ongoing medium, like they never end ever, that eventually I think the end of all stories, or not the end, but like one of the last things you can do in any type of story, if you want to keep it going forever, is a multiverse situation, because that's
right.
It's infinite possibility, right? So I think if anything runs long enough, you end up running into that at some point, especially if it's sci-fi related. I mean, and time travel is kind of a form of that too. So even things like Game of Thrones, where like there's different possible paths, and that feels more like a loop. But you get what I'm saying, though. So no, I wrap it up. I think it's great. I think if you're interested in seeing the movie and you saw the trailer and thought, I don't know about that, give it a shot, give it a chance. Yeah. Maybe rent it when it comes out and just watch it.
I'll say that even if like. I will say, like, you know, if I'm talking criticisms, I do feel like it gets a little bit exposition heavy in like the first third of the movie, which kind of have to a little bit with this concept of how kind of like it's a very high concept idea. So you kind of have to explain some particulars before the plot can really get going.
Yeah. It has to wind itself
I will
up
say,
for
like,
sure.
Maybe if you, it would be hard for me to imagine anyone being bored watching this movie. Like, even if not all of it connects with you, it throws so much at you so quickly, and so in such complex and interesting ways that it's just, I think it's just I think it's just a fun movie. Like, you know, you may come away from like not connecting with the characters or the storyline maybe or something like that, but like at a just spectacle level, I think it's a really fun, really just interesting movie to watch. And and also just kind of a good conversation. Like sometimes you want a movie where like you can watch it with somebody and have something to talk about it with afterwards. And I think it's definitely one of those where there's a lot to pull out of it.
100%. No, that's a great way to end it. Well, Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you thought of Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's probably a dozen more gags and funny things that this does that we've just forgotten. Honestly, when you mentioned Ratacoonie, I just completely forgot about Ratacoonie till you mentioned that. Then it was like, oh my god, yeah, and that was one of the funniest things the movie does. Like especially towards the end of the movie where it really pays that off. It's wonderful. But yeah, write into us, bit.ly/241mail. We'll read it on the show or read it on 241 Joe. And yeah, we'd love to hear what you think.
We would love to hear what you think. And of course, if you can't write us into our Bitly, you can always find us on youtube.com/241studios. Write us in the comment section below. We'll respond to you. And again, if you want it on the show, write into our Bitly. You can, if you want on the podcast, put in the title Podcast 241. If you want on 241 Joe, put 241 Joe live in the title description. Daniel, of course, it was a pleasure talking to you. Maybe next week we'll kind of get some more things ironed out. We're very close to Doctor Strange, and of course we'll be talking about that as soon as we possibly can after that movie comes out. I know we want to watch it as soon as we possibly can too. We have Halo, we have Moon Knight going on, a lot of cool things happening, and we're even gearing up towards Obi-Wan, and hopefully Bruce will be back on relatively soon, and we may even have another special guest joining us in the next month or so to talk another TV show that's currently airing at the moment. So, had a good time. We'll do it again next week. My name is Donovan Thompson.
I am Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.